we have every day new news on UFO headlines throughout the country. And we've got our good friend and super genius, Jason McClellan, here with us to tell us about the news of the week. J. McClellan, super genius. What do you got for us?
Yo, you want your UFO news? I got your UFO news right here.
Come on, don't pretend like you're...
Well, I have a mohawk, so I must be from Brooklyn. Or I guess I'm required to be from Brooklyn to have a mohawk.
Does the mohawk, and maybe this is what you're trying to tell me here, reduce your IQ during the period that you have the mohawk?
I think the jury's still out on that one.
No,
Perhaps it has, and that's why I can't answer you.
Maybe.
Well, let's do news, Alejandro. This
Let's
is your UFO news brief for Monday, August 8th, 2011. A family in El Cajon, California, saw strange lights in the sky on the night of Sunday, May 31st. Todd Gibson was walking his dogs just before 10 p.m. when he noticed the UFO. He described the object as having two bright orange and white lights. He further explained, "I've seen planes, I've seen satellites. There's always tiny blinking lights. There wasn't anything like that with this. It was solid, one color the entire time." And that's according to KFMB-TV, the local CBS affiliate. Todd's wife, Stacy, recorded the lights with the family's video camera, and they watched the object moving through the sky for 5 minutes before it suddenly disappeared. KFMB-TV reports that the FAA had no idea what the mysterious lights were.
Yeah. Some interesting sightings that we've had lately.
Yeah, and, you know, this is sort of the common thing with the FAA. You know, these lights happen in the sky, and they have nothing on radar, so they're no help.
Yeah. And the problem is, of course, we found where they say they have nothing, and then someone does a Freedom of Information Act request, and lo and behold, oops, we did have something.
Where did these radar images come from?
Yeah.
Yep. And that's interesting. I drive through El Cajon all the time, coming back from San Diego.
Oh, really?
And it's fun to look at the sky. I always look at the sky on my drive.
Beautiful sky out there?
I always see, lots of sky, and you always see lights in the sky.
Yeah, I went to Grand Canyon, and on the way back, saw not the biggest one I've ever seen, but a really big shooting star meteorite going through the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was with me, and she was really floored. She's like, "Oh my gosh, what was that?" And she had never seen one that big. But I'm watching the sky, especially at night, all the time. So I've seen some really cool stuff, especially on the way to my house out through the desert.
I bet.
Mm-hmm.
You've got great sky out by your place.
Yep.
Here's another story about something in the sky. And this was big news. It's still big news this week. But a BBC journalist spotted a UFO on his way to the airport last Wednesday morning. Mike Sewell, a well-respected sports reporter on Radio 5 Live, was totally freaked out after seeing a bright light descend toward the road in which he was driving. I don't blame this guy. I'd be freaked out if something big in the sky was zooming towards me.
I'd be excited.
It'd be awesome, but at the same time, you don't know what it's going to do, if it's going to crash into you or if it's coming after you.
Don't be a wuss. I'd be like,
look, I get excited. I've seen it before, but when it starts coming at you, you're all, uh-oh. Should I stay here with my mouth open and get my camera out and have fun, or should I run?
Get the camera.
I agree. He described the UFO as disc-shaped, and he was actually pretty embarrassed to admit that. But he said it was disc-shaped. And he said it had several lights flashing all around it, and underneath there were at least two large panel lights, soft white lights underneath. And that's according to The Sun. The UFO hovered over a field, and Swell was able to see the craft for 2 to 3 minutes before losing sight of it. UFO researcher Timothy Good commented on the sighting, stating, "Clearly this is not a conventional aircraft of any type." Good offered his opinion that the UFO could have been secret military aircraft, but he also stated it might well be extraterrestrial. Swell is confident that what he saw was not an airplane or a helicopter. And the cool thing is that this guy, this radio personality who is well known, it was either the same day or the following day, he did a radio interview explaining his sighting.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was funny to hear him, and that's how we hear a lot of sightings reported, people talking through it, and they're not really believers, if you want to call them that, but after they see these things, they're so floored and they can't believe it themselves. And this guy did the same thing when he was describing it. He saw, I hate to say it, but it was disc shaped. I can't describe it any other way. That's what it was. It was a disc. It was not an airplane.
Yeah, very cool that he was brave enough to come forward to talk about it, even though, like you said, he was embarrassed about what he saw. And it made big news, I think, especially because the media likes when other media, have an experience, and especially because there's access to this guy. He talked to different people, and even better, he did that radio show where you can hear him talking about it, and that's up there. It's up there. I know I tweeted it at Paranormal RPTR, which is my tweet, Paranormal RPTR, where I tweeted some of the stuff because I was gone last week. So, and then our website was froze for a couple of days while we were doing some maintenance. So, but I'm sure we have the link on our site where you can hear that too, huh?
Yes, we do. And also, he is, or at least was, actively looking for other witnesses, because he says he saw this while he was driving down the road, and he was trying not to steer off the road because he said it was a small country road. But he did say there was like a VW bus or something in front of him, and he said they must have seen it too. So he even said on the air that, he'd love to talk to the person who was in that vehicle to see if they saw the same thing.
And I so far haven't heard that person's come forward.
No.
But that's a pretty incredible sighting. And, it sounds similar. And I even think Michael Schratt has done, where he does on our website images of these UFOs. I'm positive, and I should look it up, that something very similar has been reported before, with a couple panels on the bottom with a softer light, a disc-shaped object with lights around the rim. And
this is perhaps stereotyping a little bit, but the first thing I thought of when I heard this story and heard this disc-shaped thing hovering over the field with its lights, I thought, well, he should check if there's a crop circle there. Maybe it was making a crop circle because they just hovered over this field.
Yep.
But that, again, is stereotyping, assuming that because
you're
it's
making a lot of assumptions here.
In the UK, it's got to be
crop circles. Who knows, though? It's crop circle season.
I know. That'd be cool.
You never know. That'd be incredible.
But that was a great sighting. And we've got another sighting here that's a little closer to our home here in Arizona. Michael Baca, a 20-year-old resident of Kingman, Arizona, photographed a series of lights in the night sky on Thursday, August 4th. He followed the lights into the desert, where several other people had already gathered to watch the strange lights. Baca observed the lights for more than an hour or so as they danced across the sky. He was able to take photographs and record video with his iPhone 4. He said the lights weren't zooming, but rather he described they were methodical in their movement. According to the Daily Miner, Baca forwarded his photos to local historian Rob Chilcote of the Kingman Army Airfield Museum, who upon seeing the photos was immediately reminded of the Phoenix Lights incident of 1997. After reviewing the photos, Chilcote said the Kingman lights could have been from an F-22 or F-35, but he further stated that those aircraft would have created audible jet noise, and according to Baca, whatever he photographed Thursday night was completely silent. The sighting was reported to the National UFO Reporting Center, and there's no word yet on how many people observed this series of dancing lights above Kingman. But it's interesting that there was already a group of people gathered to watch these lights when this guy followed them into the desert. But have you seen these pictures?
I've seen the pictures because the video is... Didn't he say he took video?
He did say he took video, but the newspaper, the Kingman newspaper, didn't have any of that video.
Yeah, and the pictures were really interesting. I mean, this is one of those, when you have pictures, you have to go off of witness testimony that and trust that the lights were in the area that he talked about, of course, or something. But yeah, you have these two rows of lights up in the sky at night, very mysterious, and depending on if the thing seems to be very large if it was one object.
Right. And, he says it was an iPhone 4, and there are so many different camera apps for the iPhone 4 to do different things. You can control shutter speed and things like that. So, with multiple lights in the sky, you think, it could be some sort of delay, and those are blinking lights.
Yeah.
But they don't seem to be in the same place or...
Well, and the camera movement, they have a blur effect where they're streaking,
right,
and they're all streaking together, which would show that they were probably all in one position when he took the picture.
Right.
Of course, it could be like lights inside of a house, a row of lights that he has on the ceiling of his kitchen or something like that.
Sure.
When it's dark out. But if it was really outside, of course, that's what would be incredible.
Right.
That'd be great.
Yeah, they look pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been quite a few UFO sightings in Australia's Northern Territory lately, and a man from the town of Katherine was able to photograph one of these UFOs. This man, David Schumann, was having dinner with his boss when they noticed an unusually large star that hovered in the sky for 20 minutes. Schumann stepped outside to snap pictures of the unusual object, and he described a real glowing about the object as it was very bright. And the object suddenly moved towards him as he was taking the photos. Then, Schumann described, suddenly the bugger started to change shape, then it swung out wide to my far right, ducking beyond the trees. He also described the object changing color and apparently separating before it disappeared. So those are some wild descriptions there. And for his sake, it's fortunate that he was with his boss and he didn't tell his boss that later because he'd probably get fired. But,
yeah.
But his boss is the one who first saw it and pointed it out because they were inside eating, and then he went out to take the photos.
And this one has one picture, right?
Yes, it does.
And it's kind of a bright light. It's hard to make anything out.
It's kind of greenish and weird. You can't really tell what's going on in it.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the problem with night.
But yeah, it's a
Pictures of
bizarre
bright
photo.
lights.
You can't really make anything out.
Yeah.
But the description by itself is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So. Well, here's some cool news, Alejandro. I know you love space news, and really exciting space news from last week. So first of all, scientists claim to have discovered the oxygen molecule for the first time ever in deep space. Small signatures of molecular oxygen were detected in the star-forming complex of the constellation Orion by the Herschel telescope. The Huffington Post points out that oxygen is the third most abundant element in the universe, but until now, the molecular form of oxygen has never been found outside of Earth. Similarly, in their recent press release, NASA stated individual atoms of oxygen are common in space, particularly around massive stars. But molecular oxygen, which makes up about 20% of the air we breathe, has eluded astronomers until now. The detection of molecular oxygen in space lends support to the notion that life as we know it could exist elsewhere in the universe. The details of the Herschel telescope find were published in the Astrophysical Journal. And again, Alejandro, while we've commented before about how it's not really closed-minded, but, you know, the narrow approach of NASA and a lot of mainstream scientists is to solely look for life as we know it. And it's understandable. I mean, that's all we know. But, you know, this is something that opens the door for them to say, oh, look, the things we know point to the possibility of things elsewhere. You know, we talked about this before with the discoveries from last year with life existing in harsh environments and arsenic environments and things like that. That was new and opened their eyes to looking to places we don't normally look, things that aren't Earth-like. But now discovering oxygen, the type of oxygen we breathe, molecular oxygen, that hopefully means that they're not wasting their time.
I think it's, I didn't read the oxygen one until I got here, actually, and saw yours. For some reason, I missed that. But that's so wild. I mean, it's
well, we've mentioned this, too, before with many space news stories. Things like this that are absolutely huge sometimes don't get very much attention.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's just so wild, discovery after discovery of that indicate there has to be life everywhere.
Well, let's talk about this other story.
Yeah.
That
I'm
happened
trying not to mention it.
also next week that happened the day after that. NASA issued a press release on Thursday announcing a major discovery on Mars. Data collected by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the MRO, suggests there could be flowing water on Mars during the warmest months on the planet. According to the press release, images provided by the MRO show dark, finger-like figures that appear and extend down some Martian slopes during late spring through summer, fade in winter, and return during the next spring. Alfred McEwen of the University of Arizona explains, the best explanation for these observations so far is the flow of briny water. In our previous story we just mentioned, discovery of molecular oxygen in space, and now with the possibility of flowing water on Mars, the likelihood of discovering life as we know it in other parts of the universe continues to grow. And according to NASA Administrator Charles Bolden, NASA's Mars exploration program keeps bringing us closer to determining whether the red planet could harbor life in some form, and it reaffirms Mars as an important future destination for human exploration. And a detailed report of those findings is in last week's edition of Science.
Uh-huh. You know, when the Mars Explorer, I think it was called, or, you know, those last satellites that went out and took pictures, which were years ago, they took pictures, and a lot of them looked like water.
Right.
Some of them looked like deep bodies of water. There were a couple pictures that very much looked like water in a spring, like gushing out of a side of a cliff. And at that time, which is probably had to have been 5, 6, maybe 10 years ago, I made a bet with my stepdad and that there was water on Mars. And this, at the time, the European Space Agency was saying that they had found water, and it was they found it in the atmosphere. But NASA, being, you know, the kind of pig-headed people they can be sometimes, were like, oh, you know, they weren't even acknowledging the European Space Agency. It took them 1 or 2 years to acknowledge that, oh yeah, I think we have found water in the atmosphere. Or the Europeans, or the British had already shown that. But I made a bet with my dad, or stepdad, that there was water on Mars. So when that happened, and NASA, he wouldn't listen to Europe, you know, it's got to be NASA. So when NASA admitted it, I said, well, did you see NASA finally admitted there's water? And he said, no, you said there was standing water. So I said, okay.
He'll always
I'll
fight you
take
on
that
it.
bet.
He'll always fight you on it.
Yeah, and I said, okay, we can change the bet if you want. But now, I mean, the discovery of standing water, and they say, people were saying, oh, it's too cold out there. But what they're saying is, during a period of time,
Right.
it's warm enough, and the salt water doesn't freeze as quickly as regular water, so that there is probably standing water. And that, like you said, the changing in the erosion shows that there's probably some flowing water there. Absolutely amazing. I mean, and who knows? I mean, just like our oceans here, they don't all freeze. The top freezes, but not the entire thing.
And you make a good point, too, about previous discoveries that have been made, previous studies, previous missions. There have been several that have detected indicators that could possibly lead to water on Mars. But this, so far, NASA feels is their strongest proof.
Yeah.
So
I wish, and I can understand being careful of speculation.
Right.
Because, of course, you want to prove that there's something there before you really come out and talk about it. But it would be cool if they can at least, you know, acknowledge. And it'll put to bed a lot of conspiracy stuff, too. If they could say, you know, there are several pictures that look like it could be water. Some of these even look like they could be standing bodies of water. But they also could be other things. So we don't know yet. You know, we're going to look into it. But even making those statements makes them a friendlier. And plus it creates more excitement, like, wow, NASA says there could be water. And I think it would help their funding. It would help, especially right now, when they're struggling and they seem, well, and they've had this problem for a long time where they seem stagnant when they're really not, because they're not telling us what they're doing.
Right. I think they like the controversy, Alejandro.
Yeah,
they like
maybe.
Conspiracy. They like controversy.
They're engineers and stuff, so they like to be stubborn, just like my stepdad, who is a wildlife biologist. He's just like those guys, like to be stubborn and to argue, and they need good PR.
They do, because they've got a lot of good news coming out.
I know, and exciting stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, why don't they tell us when they're going to go do some of these exciting things, like going to the asteroids and stuff? You know, you don't really hear about that until
they do tell
launch.
us, but yes, you're right. They do need better PR.
Yeah,
because
you don't
unless
hear
you look
about it.
for it, you don't know
Exactly.
about it. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Alejandro, that is it for the news. Remember to check out all of these stories we talked about and a lot more stories at openminds.tv, your source for UFO-related news. I'm Jason McClellan, the UFO news guy, and you've been briefed.